Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk on Tuesday said authorities have detained 32 people suspected of coordinating with Russia to engage in acts of sabotage. They include a Pole, Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. So what types of attacks are they carrying out, and what can be done to prevent them? Joining me now is Paulina Piasecka, director at the Terrorism Research Center at Collegium Civitas. Hello, Paulina, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
It's a great pleasure to be here.
Now, Donald Tusk has said that 32 people suspected of collaborating with Russia have been detained or arrested in Poland. Should we expect these attacks to continue? And is there anything we can do to try and prevent them? Or what should society do to stay vigilant?
Well, stay vigilant.
Yeah.
So to start with the very beginning of the question, unfortunately, I'm quite pessimistic as to the ceasing of Russian activities in Poland or Russian hostilities towards Poland and other countries in the region, because that's the only way in which we could assume that the attacks would stop, right? So I think that for as long as Russia is actually an actively engaged actor in pursuing hostile goals throughout the region, we unfortunately have to expect and see into the future that is threatened by the widely understood hybrid warfare tools of attack. Now, quite obviously, hybrid warfare is called the war amongst people. That's the war amongst civilians. That's the war below the threshold of war, which means that you are very right in saying that the society should be engaged to an extent in prevention of such attacks, because we need the partners in people. We need the millions of pairs of eyes throughout the territory of Poland, because however good our intelligence is and however good our intelligence cooperation with partners is, there's still more to look for and to look at when it comes to the threats.
Certainly. Now, how to respond to Russia? Poland says that it does not take part in any sabotage attacks within Russia. So should Poland just, from one side, sit there and just deal with the blows as they come, or should it respond somehow?
Well, I don't think that response to the Russian attacks that would be an open response would be treated as a response. It would probably be treated, at least by Kremlin, as an aggressive attack, because Kremlin does not admit to committing any dangerous criminal acts in the territories of other countries, right? That's all covert operations. And that's the terrifying beauty of hybrid war, right? You are doing things to destabilize, you are doing things to influence adversely other countries, but you are doing it below the threshold of war. So you're doing it in a way that actively disables the response mechanisms, and not only the individual response mechanism, it also makes completely helpless international organizations that would look for casus belli, right? There is no aggressive war, there is no aggressive act, so how can we come together and respond to such an attack? So I think the prevention, but the active defense, right? The far-looking early warning system, extensive cooperation with intelligence services throughout the region, and also with the allies that have the global reach when it comes to SIGINT intelligence, so signals intelligence, the technical intelligence. That's probably our best bet when it comes to looking into the future and trying to divine what might happen to us soon.
What types of attacks do you think it is that Poland is particularly vulnerable to, if you were to pick, I'd say, the top ones?
I'm, as a responsible citizen of Poland and a security researcher, I'm not going to talk about the most vulnerable targets. Even if I knew them, even if I had any insight into the weaknesses of security systems, I probably not talk about them, but what I can talk about is what might be an interesting goal of attack, right? And so there are two sides to this discourse. The first side is quite obviously Poland as the transportation, as the logistics hub for the support of Ukraine, which means that quite obviously transportation systems that are being used to transfer any weapons, arms into the Ukrainian territory. That would be an interesting goal for Russian activities. Any trains, any train hubs, these are the targets.
We know they've been interested in such you know, there's been people arrested for taking photographs of the transportation routes. But wouldn't that, you know, wouldn't an attack on, say, supplies coming into Ukraine, wouldn't that cross that threshold for an act of war, essentially?
That's provided that we would be able to prove that there are Russians behind that. Let me remind you that this is what started happening first in Crimea and then in Donbas region, right? This is never done overtly by the Russian operatives. The latest arrest, it's, I think, the Colombia citizen. And so what do you do then? How do you prove the connection? I mean, this is doable, at least in case of this Colombian, right? He's arrested. He's already, I think, supposed to serve 8 years in Czechia, and now the next trial is going to take place here. But that's the problem, right? You would have to be able to prove without any doubt that there is a state on the other side, and then there is a political decision. Once you are absolutely sure that it's the Russians on the other side, what do? Do you decide to say that, yes, we're at war with Russia? Is this the road that we want to take? This is not an easy decision, and it's not an easy decision not only because of the fact that war is a terrifying idea and that the amount of sacrifices and the level of tragedy that we're seeing in Ukraine is definitely discouraging when it comes to deciding that, yes, we're going to go to war. But also because these are the politicians who make decisions, and politicians make decisions based on the electoral cycle. Now, anybody in any country, not only Poland, that is going to say, yes, we're going to go to war, they're going to pay the price, the political price. And so it's never going to be an easy decision, and it's never going to be an easy interpretation, no matter how.
Okay, all right. So at what point is there a red line? There are, you know, a lot of these acts which we're seeing, we call them acts of sabotage or acts of hybrid war, but can't we call them acts of terrorism as well? And how bad does an attack have to be until it crosses this threshold to where a response would be elicited?
Okay, so these are all very good questions, and they're the questions that reach not only into the analysis of the current situation, but also into the very nature of both hybrid warfare and terrorism. Mainly because of the fact that that's the core, that's the nature of hybrid war. You are keeping it under this threshold of war by design. You are blurring the line between war and peace. You are weakening the decision-making mechanism. So if the attack obviously crossed this threshold, this red line, as you call it, that would mean that somebody messed up. Somebody on this hostile side messed up and allowed us to make this obvious decision, yes, we're going to war. That's the first thing. The second thing is, with terrorism might be treated rather as a part of this wider toolbox in hybrid war, because there are many tools in the toolbox of hybrid war, right? We're talking about the acts of sabotage, we're talking arsons, we're talking the sabotage of, say, transportation routes. We're talking, for example, information campaigns, political campaigns, we're talking disinformation, we're talking, well, economic instability, disinformation that might lead to the market panic. So there are so many tools, which, by the way, are very interestingly listed in the Russian military doctrine of 2014 that lists the characteristics of the modern conflict environment. And just by chance, it lists all of those tools, including, for example, the use of the political protests financed and directed from beyond the borders of the target territory, which is extremely interesting. But I would treat terrorism as one of the tools in hybrid war. And again, hybrid war, if it ever crosses the red line, it's going to cross this red line because we decided that it crossed the red line, because we reached the point at which we feel ready and we feel that we can go to war, not only should, but also can go to war with the fair chance of winning that confrontation.
Well, let's hope we don't get to that point or cross that red line. Paulina Piasecka, director at the Terrorism Research Center at Collegium Civitas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes this edition of World News Tonight. Thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. Good night.